Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So since yesterday was Mother's Day, I'm gonna do this really quick suggestion that I had on my Instagram. And the suggestion was that for everybody who saw the other suggestion, I'm gonna do that in the next video. So before I forget, I want to say thank you to my new subscribers. So without further ado, I'm gonna get into the video. Okay, so I used to spend a lot of time with my grandma. She was basically my second mother. A lot of my friends know that, so but for the new people that are on here, she was basically my second mother. I really loved being around her. So summer of 2014. No, summer of 2015. There you go. Summer 2015, I called my aunt and I said, I want to come down and surprise grandma because she hadn't seen me in 6 years. So I said, I want to come down and surprise grandma. So she said, okay. So my mom booked me a flight and I arrived in Atlanta and my aunt picked me up. So we were getting back to the house now. At that point, my aunt had two dogs, Precious and Shadow. Precious died last year, so there's only one left. So my aunt had pulled up in the driveway. She told me to duck because my grandma was outside watering her plants. So my grandma went back in the house, and where I found her was the backyard. So I was still in the car. At this point, my aunt came back for me, and I ran to the back of the house where the backyard was. So I ran back there, and my grandma was there. So I remember stopping because I just couldn't believe it. After not seeing her for 6 years, I'm like, I'm home. So I remember her just standing there, and I just ran up and hugged her, and she gave me the tightest hug ever. And we went a lot of places that summer. We went to CNN, we went to the Coca-Cola factory, we went to the zoo, we went to the aquarium. It was me, my aunt, and my grandma. We did a lot of fun things that summer. That was the last time I ever saw her alive. And she wanted me to stay, and I couldn't because she wanted me to stay a little bit longer, and I couldn't. So I got a text message June 20th, I think, and it said, sorry, I can't call you because Alicia's around and she doesn't know that she's died. So I just remember screaming, saying that I was sorry. I remember screaming, crying, screaming, crying, screaming and crying, because my best friend had died and I didn't even know, and nobody told me anything. Everybody just I guess let me think that she was still there. So because at the hospital, I was in labor at this point when my grandma had died. The hospital, the nurse came in and I was like, where's my mom? She was like, well, she's outside crying, something about your grandma died. So at this point I was like, no, it's not my grandma, because my grandma's, she's too strong. Like, me growing up, she was the strongest person. I never thought, and it's gonna sound dumb, I just never thought she was gonna die. So I was like, I looked at the nurse, I was like, you're lying. So, because at that point I was like, I didn't trust nobody. So I was like, you're lying. So my mom had came and I was like, is grandma gone? She was like, no, where did you get that from? No. And so I went a good 10 days believing that my grandma was still alive, and she wasn't. So yeah, like I said, I remember I was screaming, crying. I actually threw myself on the floor because, in fact, I was on the wall and I slid down on the floor because I felt weak. So I just fell on the floor. And I remember laying, it's really not funny. I just remember laying on the tile and I was just screaming, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't call you back. And yeah, I was just, at that point I was so numb. And the baby was about 9 days old because he was born on the 11th, and at that time it was June 20th. So I just remember being so numb. Sometimes it's like I didn't even want to get out of my bed because I just didn't feel it. So we went to Georgia because the funeral was on June 25th. So we went to Georgia and we got there safely because my mom drove. We stayed at one of my aunt's houses, and I remember my aunt, who is my grandma's daughter, she came over so that we could do the bulletin together. And I just remember seeing her walk out because she was crying, and I honestly wanted to chase her at that point to hug her, but I was a wreck and I didn't want to cry in front of her and break her down even more. So I just stayed where I was. And so at my grandma's wake, I was supposed to sing, but I was in denial. I was in a lot of denial. I was like, this is a joke. So I just ignored everything. Even though I was crying, I was still in denial. I was like, there's no way that grandma could be dead. I was like, we have to see her physically in a casket. So everybody that knows me knows I'm scared of dead people. I don't touch them. I don't go near them. I'm terrified. So me and my mom and the baby had drove over to they had it in a funeral home because the funeral home had a little spot where you could do like a little service. So it was at the funeral home, and basically I left the baby in the car with my mom because the things that they use to embalm bodies isn't really safe for newborns, and he was just born. So, and he didn't have any shots, so I didn't really want to bring him out. So I left him with my mom, and my mom stayed in the car, and we were only supposed to be there for, I think, 10 minutes because at that point I was breastfeeding, and I needed to go home and shower because of everything that was in the atmosphere so that I could feed him. So when I had already pumped a bottle for him, so there was a bottle in the car. So yeah, I walked in to the service and I saw everybody sitting there, everybody that knew me from when I was 2, and I don't remember them. So I remember some of them, not a lot of them. But yeah, I walked into the service and the casket was right there. So I walked out because I started bawling like crazy. So I walked back in afterward. After I could pull myself together, I walked back in. And I sat way in the back because I didn't want anybody to see me because my eyes were like bloodshot red. I didn't want anybody to see me. So then one of the I'm not gonna say the names on here, but one of the elders from my old church, Lithonia, said, can you, since you're her granddaughter, can you come and say something? So I was looking at him like, because I don't do good talking in front of a whole big crowd. That's not a good idea. I'm gonna freeze. So I was like, So he was like, come on. So I'm really good at talking just alone. I couldn't really say anything in front of a lot of people because I get very nervous. So I went to the front. My aunt was sitting in the front. I went to the front and I said, well, I'm Melda's granddaughter. Melda is her name. I'm Melda's granddaughter. And then basically I told the story that I'm telling y'all right now. I told about the last time that I saw her was in the summer. And I just remember I was bawling my eyes out because at that point the casket was still open so I could see her. So I was bawling. So my aunt came and just hugged me and just took me back into the aisle. And I was supposed to sing, and when they called me to sing, I was like, I can't, because I'm not gonna get the song out. I'm just gonna cry, just move on with the thing. So they moved on, and after the service, the casket was still open. They left it open for the whole service. So I went over, and she had a smile on her face. So it was a very pretty smile. I touched her forehead, and I don't like touching dead people, but this was my grandma. This was the last time I was gonna see her. I touched her forehead, and it honestly looked like she was breathing. And I stood there, and her chest was going up and down. And I said to my aunt, I'm like, Auntie, she's breathing. My auntie was like, no, she's not. I was like, she's breathing. And she wasn't. And I just remember touching her hands. I was always playing with my grandma's hands when I was growing up because she had little veins popping out, so I used to just poke them. So, the day of the funeral came now, and that's when I actually bought the baby around people because my mom had to be inside too because, she wasn't going to miss the funeral. So I saw my elementary teacher, and she was like, what are you doing here? I'm like, this is my grandma. She was like, y'all are related? I'm like, yeah. So she was like, oh. Because we all went to the same church. I was homeschooled by one of the church people. So they all saw me grow up. So I put the shield over the baby's car seat, and we went inside. And they said, does anybody want to see the body? So I just remember sitting there, and then I got up to go, and my legs just like stopped in the middle of the aisle. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm not supposed to go. So I turned around and was going to walk back to my seat, and my auntie was like, come. So I said my goodbyes, and then we went to the fellowship hall for lunch, dinner, funeral, after party, whatever you want to call it. So my grandmother, how would I describe her? The most beautiful soul that you could ever meet. always there when I needed her. She was my first best friend. You know, she taught me to always, you know, do what I have to do. So that's basically it for this video. So don't forget to subscribe and like down below. Everybody stay safe during this quarantine disaster. So, I'm gonna drop my Instagram below, right there, and that's my spam page, so you can message me about ideas for the next video, and I will pick, because I already have that other one. I will pick. So I'm not gonna promise everybody that they're gonna get their question or statement answered, but I will try my best. So peace out.